It's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, you're watching and listening to GB News. Coming up on the political correction, we're joined by the Shadow Secretary for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport to discuss Britishness. And we're of course talking about the Jubilee weekend. That plus much more after your latest headlines with Tamsin.
Arlene, thank you. Good morning. It's 10 o'clock. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The Prince of Wales has paid tribute to the Queen at the Platinum Jubilee concert, thanking her for a lifetime of selfless service. Prince Charles also spoke of his late father, the Duke of Edinburgh, who he said was there in spirit. As 22,000 people gathered outside Buckingham Palace, the future king described events over the Jubilee weekend as an outpouring of warmth and affection.
Immense regret that she cannot be here in person with us this evening. But Windsor Castle is barely 20 miles away. So if we cheer loudly enough, she might just hear us. So let's all join together.
Well, millions are set to gather for street parties across the country today, with more than 85,000 big Jubilee lunches being held. The Duke and Duchess of Cornwall will attend a feast at the Oval Cricket Ground in South London, while the Earl and Countess of Wessex will meet people on the long walk leading up to Windsor Castle. Meanwhile, 10,000 people will stage a 2-mile-long carnival procession from Horse Guards Parade down the Mall to Buckingham Palace. And it's hoped Her Majesty the Queen will make an appearance on the palace balcony to round off the weekend celebrations. In other news, the government is being accused of attempting to deport unaccompanied minors to Rwanda. The Home Office is attempting to remove 2 male migrants who claim that they are 16. However, the government has carried out age assessments and believes they're 23 and 26. Refugee charity Care for Calais is issuing a legal challenge to halt their deportation. The first deportation flight is expected to leave on June the 14th. The Prime Minister will this week update the country on how the NHS is dealing with the COVID-19 backlog. Boris Johnson described work being done by the government as the NHS's biggest ever catch-up programme. Meanwhile, Health Secretary Sajid Javid says the government is putting more money into health and social care than any other has done before, but there's no quick fix. Tube services across the capital will be severely disrupted tomorrow because of a strike by thousands of workers in a dispute over jobs and pensions. Transport for London is advising people to avoid travelling as members of the Rail, Maritime and Transport Union will walk out for 24 hours. Many stations, especially those in central and south London, will be closed, while stations that can be opened may only operate for limited periods. Ukraine's capital, Kiev, has been rocked by several explosions after a relatively calm couple of weeks there. Smoke could be seen drifting over the city early this morning as emergency services responded to incidents in 2 separate districts. At least 1 person's been taken to hospital. Japan has criticised North Korea after it carried out what's believed to be its largest ever ballistic missile test. The country test-fired 8 short-range missiles from the capital, Pyongyang. Japan's defence minister says the tests cannot be tolerated. It comes just a day after South Korea and the United States ended joint military drills. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to the political correction.
Good morning. You're watching and listening to GB News. This is The Political Correction. I'm Arlene Foster and today I'm joined by Paul Embry in Norfolk. So we're here for the next 2 hours to correct politics and to put you, the people, back in charge. And it's not about journalists talking to journalists, it's about you telling us what you think. So what's coming up this hour? We're talking about Britishness with the Shadow Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, Lucy Powell. Should the UK rejoin the EU single market? Tobias Elwood thinks so, and he thinks that it would help ease the cost of living crisis. And we're of course talking about the Jubilee weekend with over 85,000 street parties planned for today, despite the weather. And of course we want to hear from you. So if you want to get involved in the conversation and have your email read out on the show, then email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at GBNews. This is The Political Correction. Now, it's been a fantastic weekend for the country, uniting to celebrate 70 years of rule from Her Majesty the Queen, and indeed all things British. In an article written this weekend, Shadow Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, Lucy Powell MP, argued that the Labour Party, rather than the Conservatives, now enshrine those patriotic principles. Paul, did you have a chance to look at the article and what did you make of it?
I did. I thought it was welcome, Arlene. I think it's a step on the right path. There's no question that the Labour Party has been seen over recent years as unpatriotic. I think some in the Labour Party would attribute that just to the period of Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. I think that would be a mistake, actually. I think you can trace it back several years before that. I think there was an element in the Labour Party that became very dominant, the liberal left, if you like, who did sneer at traditional ideals such as patriotism, who did sneer at people, including Labour voters actually, in working class communities who held what you might call small c conservative attitudes around things like patriotism and believing in control of immigration, believing in things like the nuclear family, loving their country, etc. The Labour Party increasingly over the years, and I saw this as someone involved with the Labour Party, looked down at people like that, denigrated people like that. You think of people like Gillian Duffy, for example, somebody who voted Labour all of her life, but simply because she expressed concerns over the level of immigration was dismissed by a Labour Prime Minister as being a bigoted old lady. So I welcome the intervention of Lucy. I think the article was good, but I would say that it's going to take a hell of a lot more than just a leader standing in front of the Union flag and a few articles in The Guardian about patriotism to convince lost voters, Labour's lost voters, and there are millions of them, that the Labour Party does really love this country and does understand the sort of very understated patriotism that often motivates those voters and those communities.
And we've seen some of that very much over the weekend, Paul, and we'll talk about that later. But I'm delighted to say that Lucy Powell now joins us, and we're going to talk about that article. Lucy, what inspired you to write this article about Britishness and about patriotism?
Well, I think Paul's absolutely right. I think as the Labour Party haven't always looked comfortable with some of these issues in the past. But as a party, I really do strongly believe that we enshrine many of the values, the traditions, the vision for the future and the support of our British institutions, much valued British institutions, that all make our country great. And I think I wanted to try and set some of that out in an article today, on a day, on a weekend where we are all showing that fantastic togetherness, coming together, celebrating what is the very best of Britain that's on show for the world. And look, I would agree with Paul too, in the sense that this is something that we have to relentlessly and continuously show that we are a party that does love our country and loves those traditions and those values that we hold dear. But we also want to see a country that's got a better future ahead of it than perhaps it's always had in the past.
And I have to say, I very much like that positive element that we were looking to the future and we were confident about who we are, and that very much struck me. But before I bring Paul back in again, Lucy, obviously coming from Northern Ireland, you can understand why I would be somewhat sceptical about the Labour Party and their Britishness, because of course there are members of your party that don't subscribe to Northern Ireland, for example, having representation from the Labour movement. And indeed, some members don't even say the phrase Northern Ireland, they call it the North of Ireland. So it will take a lot more to convince people that the Labour Party really is the party for the whole of the UK.
Well, and we have to be for all parts of the UK, absolutely. And look, Northern Ireland, I'm not going to debate with you, Arlene. You know much better than I do the politics of Northern Ireland and the issues in Northern Ireland. But we take very seriously our role as the honest broker in that situation, as the hopefully as the party that could be the government of the UK, and that would be something we would take very seriously indeed. But as you point out, that patriotic feeling stretches right across the UK. And what I wanted to try and set out was that I do believe that our best days can be ahead of us, not just behind us, and that patriotism can't just be something that just celebrates our past or harks back to a time in the past. It has to be about how Britain can lead and be successful in this ever-changing and very quickly changing sort of global situation. And we've seen that, haven't we, in recent years, really come to the fore with Brexit, COVID, war in Ukraine, really a different sense about national resilience and national economies as well. And I think I want the Labour Party, and I think the Labour Party is at the forefront of those debates.
Paul, you had a question.
Yeah, Lucy, I was struck by what you said in your article about the importance of not rising to the culture wars, and I understand that. But what I would say is, isn't it true that, frankly, people on our side of politics, on the left, have to accept that we, in many respects, began those culture wars for the reasons that I said at the outset, that actually we did look upon traditional values and traditional communities as reactionary and bigoted, and we treated voters in those communities effectively like embarrassing elderly relatives. And it was those people who felt that their values and their culture, if you like, was under attack. So I know it's kind of a bit fashionable for people on the left now to say, well, the Tories are responsible for the culture wars. In truth, I think it can be traced to us largely, can't it?
I would agree with you in the sense that, I think culturally there has been, a growing gap. It's not just been an electoral or an economic gap. The reasons that we lost the 2019 elections so profoundly had been coming for many, many years. And you and I have discussed this in the past, Paul. It wasn't just an event of 2019. It was the Red Wall really was crumbling for 20 years, I think, if you like. And it's many of my own relatives that you're describing as well. And I certainly don't see them as embarrassing to me. And, it was one of the reasons why I took the view that we really did need to respect the outcome of the Brexit referendum. We cannot sort of be aspiring to be a party of government, aspiring to be a party that represents traditional working class communities if we don't respect people's say, people's views and people's choices. And I think But what I know from many of those voters that turned against us in recent years is that they want to see change in their lives. They want to see change in their communities. They want to see better economic outlook for themselves and their families. And that's not something that the economy as it's set up at the moment is really doing for people. And if the Labour Party is to be anything, we have to be for that transformational economic change, bringing good jobs to every community, supporting workers' rights, good, decent housing that everybody can aspire to either own or live in. And these are core Labour values that I think will resonate if we can express them in the right way. And as you say, not look like we're looking down on people or thinking that people are either thick or racist, because they're not.
Well, just before I let you go, Lucy, it would be remiss of me not to ask you, how have you been celebrating this weekend? Have you been out and about yourself, or are you in your constituency, or are you down here in London?
Yeah, no, I've been out and about in Manchester this weekend. Some fantastic events, really we had the great weather yesterday. It's now pouring down today, so thankfully a lot of those seem to happen yesterday and the day before, and it's been lovely to see people from all backgrounds, all types of people out coming together, waving their Union Jack flags and celebrating the monarch's reign. And I've been really trying to get my kids involved in it as well, because I don't think they appreciate how historically significant it is, and it might be many, many years before they see another Jubilee at all happening in this country. So we have to savour this moment, I think, for what it is.
Well, thanks, Lucy, and thanks very much for coming on this morning to discuss your article on the Labour Party and Britishness. Thank you. So this weekend, as we know, the country is celebrating 70 years of the service from Her Majesty the Queen, with millions attending events right across the UK to mark this historic event. In a Jubilee message, the Queen said that she continues to be inspired by the goodwill shown to her, adding, "This weekend provides an opportunity to reflect on all that's been achieved in this last 70 years. Paul, I'm sure you've been getting in the Jubilee mood, have you not?
I have actually, Arlene, or should I say Dame Arlene, of course, because you were a recipient of the Damehood in the Honours List, for which many congratulations. I can only imagine Her Majesty is obviously a fan of our show, because she's heard you banging the drum for the monarchy over recent weeks and has rewarded you accordingly. So that was great news. Well done for that. Slightly disappointed I was overlooked and I didn't get a knighthood, but there you go. I've been enjoying it, actually. I mean, as you know, I'm the mildest of mild Republicans. I believe that we should elect our head of state, but I've always said that if you're going to have a monarch, then you probably couldn't choose a better one. She has unquestionably served our country with dedication and a real sense of duty. And I think the celebrations are a bit of relief during what are some pretty grim times, to be honest. So I've bought into it. I've very much enjoyed it. I was actually thinking of starting a group called Republicans for the Monarchy, just to confuse a few people. But it's been good, and I know some people, who share my view about electing a head of state and whatever, have peddled a bit of miserabilism, shall we say, over the last couple of days. There's been a bit of a killjoy attitude, I think, among some Republicans, and I don't really buy into that. There's a time and a place to make those arguments, and in a free society, of course, we should be at liberty to make those arguments. I just don't think tactically now, when much of the country is coming together and there's a sense of unity and people are enjoying the spectacle, is necessarily the right time to do it. And I should say, by the way, being a fire service worker, I'm also the recipient of a commemorative medal from the Queen, which is issued to all frontline emergency service workers. So at the right moment, I'll be displaying that with pride. But it's been a good couple of days. The Platinum Party last night, I think, was hugely enjoyable. There were some fantastic acts there, and that's the type of thing that brings the country together. So whatever your view on the politics of the monarchy, there's no reason why we can't all enjoy that, I think.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to seeing you in your uniform with your medals on, Paul, very, very soon. But now we're joined by our royal reporter, Cameron Walker, who's outside Buckingham Palace at this present moment in time. Cameron, what's the mood like this morning? Is it the morning after the night before?
I think it is a little bit like that, Arlene, yes, but no sooner has had the 22,000 people who attended last night's Platinum party at the Palace had left, the big, massive clean-up operation started for today's Jubilee pageant. In the last couple of hours, we very much heard them start rehearsing for this magnificent pageant, which is due to take place in central London this morning. It starts at Westminster Abbey, ends at Buckingham Palace, and it's meant to represent Her Majesty's 70 years of service to the nation. It's going to involve around 6,000 performers, including 1,000 service personnel from the Royal Air Force, British Army and Royal Navy, and a lot to look forward to, because perhaps some people are hoping at least that Her Majesty the Queen might make one final appearance on the Buckingham Palace balcony behind me, Arlene, to round off her Platinum Jubilee bank holiday weekend.
Still in Windsor at present, Cameron, isn't that right? Because she was there yesterday and she hasn't come down to London as yet.
Yes, that's correct. She was expected to attend the St Paul's Cathedral service of Thanksgiving for her reign on Friday, but we found out on Thursday, actually, after the Trooping the Colour ceremony, that she has pulled out of attending that. But I think kind of the overall theme of this weekend, thankfully, has been the celebration of Her Majesty the Queen's reign. There were fears that perhaps certain people could upstage the events, but apart from maybe the cheeky Prince Louis on Trooping the Colour Day, when he put his hands over his ears during the magnificent fly past, it has very much been a celebration of Her Majesty's reign. She took part in 2 balcony appearances. She also took part at Windsor Castle, Arlene, in the lighting of the Platinum Jubilee beacons. Of course, she pulled out of St Paul's and the Epsom Derby, but I think all the members of the royal family appearing on the balcony at the end of Trooping the Colour really kind of symbolised the continuation of the monarchy. And of course, it's a family and a tradition and a constitutional tradition that has kind of run the course of Britain for nearly 1,000 years.
And you mentioned little Louis there. I think the best moment for me thus far, although it's up against Paddington Bear, was that interaction between Her Majesty the Queen and Louis on the balcony, Cameron. That was really, really special, wasn't it?
It certainly was really, really special. It was the oldest member of the royal family and the youngest person in the royal family, or at least on that balcony. And it, you know, it kind of showed the span of 4 generations. Her Majesty the Queen is Prince Louis's great-grandmother, and it just shows, again, that continuation. You'll have to forgive me, it just sounds like they've started rehearsing for the pageant, if you can't hear me. So yes, it was a very special moment, and it was an iconic photograph because it's, you know, it's very unique. Only in the last couple of years, really, have we had that. It's kind of shown Her Majesty's span of her reign over 70 years.
Well done, Cameron, for battling against some background noise there, and thanks for joining us this morning from Buckingham Palace. So coming up after the break, we're discussing travel chaos in the UK with hundreds of flights being cancelled this week. And as ever, here in the Political Correction, we want to hear from you. So if you want to get involved in the conversation, then email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at GBNews. See you after the break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
every morning from 6 o'clock. We'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to the Political Correction on this fabulous Jubilee weekend. And we've had a few views coming in already on what's been happening over this past few days. Melanie says, Paddington was a brilliant sketch. This is from last night's big concert. Just as good as when she met James Bond. Tapping the teaspoons to We Will Rock You was genius. And it was genius. It was absolutely brilliant. Ayinki says, now I see why they spent £3 billion for the Platinum Jubilee. It was a very beautiful concert and wasn't. The lights were amazing and everything in the sky. It was just so beautiful. And then finally, Linda, watching last night's Jubilee concert, I'm in love with Brian May's coat. There you go. It's absolutely gorgeous. Well, I'm sure we'll have many, many more views coming in throughout the programme. But unfortunately, it's been another week of travel chaos at airports across the UK, with hundreds of flights being cancelled and reports of holidaymakers waiting in queues for up to 8 hours. The Prospect Union, which represents thousands of aviation staff, issued a dire warning this week that things could get worse in the summer before they get better, adding that there are staff shortages across the industry with a huge reliance on overtime to get by day to day. Paul, it's been a very difficult time for travellers, and particularly those people going through our airports. What do we make of these delays, and what can we do to try and deal with them?
Well, I mean, the scenes are horrendous, Arlene, and you have to feel for those families who have waited so long throughout the pandemic to get away and to have a holiday abroad, only to be confronted with some of the kind of chaotic scenes that we've been witnessing at airports up and down the country. I mean, my understanding is that what happened during the pandemic is a lot of airline workers and airport workers were made redundant. Many people in those industries also changed jobs. That's left something of a chronic shortage of workers. At the same time, many people who weren't able to get away during the pandemic and got vouchers or credit returns for use after the pandemic have all kind of decided to use them at the same time. So that's put a great deal of pressure on the airports and the airlines. But you do have to ask the question, you know, why did the airlines and the airports not prepare for this? I mean, why were they booking out these flights when there was every possibility they weren't going to be able to honour those bookings? And because of that, it's led to the kind of chaotic scenes that we're witnessing. And if I were one of those people caught up in that chaos, I would be asking serious questions of the airline. You know, why wasn't there the pre-planning involved that there ought to have been? And I hope those people get the compensation that they're obviously entitled to. But, you know, I think probably more widely, we do have to look at what we did during the pandemic in terms of the restrictions and lockdown and what that has meant for the jobs market and what that has meant for thousands of vacancies now as a result of people moving on or being made redundant. Those questions, I think, need to be asked as well. And all of that, I think, needs to be fed into the various public inquiries that are likely to take place.
And I've heard some commentators and indeed some politicians saying that it's linked to Brexit. But if anybody knows Dublin Airport, they will have seen even worse scenes in Dublin Airport, actually, over this past week with people queuing right outside of the airport. So clearly it's not Brexit. It's more to do with the fact that we did allow people to go during COVID, and there hasn't been the ramp up of people that are needed now with all of the flights coming back again, Paul. And I noticed as well some people in the aviation industry were trying to point the finger at the government. But from what you've been saying, I take it that you think it's more to do with the aviation sector not being prepared for the ramp up of flights.
Well, that certainly seems the case to me. I mean, it's true some people are blaming Brexit, but the truth is, Arlene, some people will always blame Brexit for everything. You know, no matter how tenuous the link, some people who are vehemently opposed even to this day to Britain leaving the European Union will find any problem and try to trace it back to that decision to leave the EU, which is clearly a nonsense. But I also think actually that, you know, it's not just the airports, it seems to me, that are not functioning at the moment. I think there are significant areas of our public institutions that we rely on as part of our everyday lives, which actually appear to be crumbling at the moment. I mean, people, for example, people are waiting in some cases up to 6 weeks to get a GP appointment. People can't get an operation on the National Health Service. Ambulances are not arriving. If you phone HMRC or your bank, you can spend hours on the phone, trying to get through. People can't get passports and driving licenses. It seems to me that there's a kind of air of almost like the last days of Pompeii at the moment, where things that should be functioning smoothly are simply not doing so, and I think that's going to get worse and worse. And again, much of it attributable, I think, to lockdown. And we've found now, as we reopen the economy, that we've got massive kind of structural problems that directly flow from the very severe restrictions that we imposed for the best part of 2 years. And now we're paying a very heavy price for that. And how long it's going to take to put things right, frankly, I don't know.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, structurally, I think there are huge problems at the minute. But I noticed from the papers today that the Prime Minister seems to be going to make an announcement about the NHS this week. So we'll see what that brings and whether he is going to be able to deal with that huge backlog that's there in the NHS at the moment. But we'll move on and go back, if I can say that, move on and go back. Well, anyway, we'll go back now to the Jubilee weekend and to delve deeper into the Queen's Platinum Jubilee and to discuss the royal family as a whole. And I'm delighted to say that we're joined by royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. Richard, what a weekend it has been. Have you enjoyed the festivities?
I think it's been absolutely fantastic. It's been brilliantly organised, and I mean, a triumph. It shows that the Queen has still her inimitable sense of humour. No one will forget that sketch with Paddington Bear as total surprise. But looking at the initial day, tripping the colour, our 1st Battalion Irish Guards doing it to perfection, and then, of course, the Queen was on the balcony to receive them at Buckingham Palace, and subsequently we saw the 18 working royals. A very, very good way of handling it, I thought, for the fly past. A superb organisation and brilliantly colourful ceremonial, and of course then the beacons, and we saw the Queen light the beacon at Windsor. Very sad she couldn't attend the service of Thanksgiving at St Paul's, but it was moving and dignified, and the way it was handled with the Cambridges and the Sussexes ensured that despite all the efforts of journalists, this wasn't controversial, at least not then.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting too, Richard, but I agree with you. Her Majesty will have been very disappointed that she wasn't able to attend that service because, of course, faith for her is a very important part of her life. It defines her, actually.
You're absolutely right, and indeed, dedication to duty, which of course she inherited from her father, George VI, and her religious faith, and of course her relationship with her straight and stay Prince Philip. These have been, I would suggest, her rocks, so to speak, and she would have, if she could have. It's a question of balancing with these mobility problems that she had. I think we're seeing a sort of unspoken transition whereby state events. Prince Charles will deputise audiences, virtual broadcasts, and so forth. The Queen, of course, is continuing to do them and wonderfully well. But it's this balance whereby other members of the royal family do what she could not, and indeed, or feel she cannot. And of course, Princess Anne at the Derby, at the Epsom Derby, she will have been very sorry to miss that. Hopefully next year she might have a horse running. And last night, an absolute triumph with that concert.
Well, I thought it was just amazing last night, I have to say. But in terms of giving thanks for Her Majesty the Queen, I don't think it could have went any better, Richard. I mean, all of the different elements, the military, the concert, today, street parties, and of course, the big national service of Thanksgiving, they've all went according to plan. I'm sure there'll be plenty of people in the royal household who will need to have a very good rest after this weekend's over.
It does show that the royal household can do some absolutely brilliant planning, and also we're looking forward to the parade, 10,000 in it, and the gold state coach back for the first time since the Golden Jubilee, and with some sort of extraordinary footage in the windows, as though the Queen herself was riding back from her coronation, which was apparently an extremely bumpy ride. Sovereigns have not enjoyed actually being in the coach, but that will be spectacular, as we'll be looking back throughout the Queen's reign, the military pageant, and also, of course, the climactic Ed Sheeran will be singing God Save the Queen, and we're all hoping that the Queen, and it is reported Prince Charles, Prince William and Prince George may well be on the balcony, the line of succession stretching there to the future. And the way I think also Prince Charles and Prince William have handled things and are working in tandem very clearly, I think bodes very well for the monarchy's future. I thought the tributes to the Queen by the Prince of Wales last night were absolutely delightful. Indeed, Prince William also so passionate about the environment. Wonderful to see Buckingham Palace, as it were, cloaked in foliage in those amazing photographic shots.
Well, Richard, it certainly showed the continuity of the monarchy, and when you see all of the different working royals there, right from the youngest right up until the oldest. But thanks for joining us today, Richard, and enjoy the rest of the day. I'm sure you'll be out and about.
Thank you.
So coming up after the break, we're joined by the Housing Minister, Stuart Andrew MP. And of course, if you want to get involved in the conversation today, email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at GBNews.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back to GB News. And lots of you have been getting in touch this morning again. Michael says, I didn't see Starmer waving his little Union Jack at the concert last night. All the talk about Boris seems to have drowned out an actual lack of Labour patriotism. So somebody not agreeing that Labour is the party of Britishness there. Whilst Darren, he says, Boris Johnson and the Tories are proving that flags aren't enough. You need to respect the public and listen. And Andrew says, I think Starmer will become Prime Minister because he's not Johnson. The same rule that got Biden elected, the who they aren't factor. Well, keep the views coming in. We're always delighted to hear from you and to hear what you have to say. But it's not just Buckingham Palace that's been in a celebratory move over this last few days. Street parties and events have been taking place right across the country to mark this truly historic event. Housing Minister Stuart Andrew is no stranger to a royal party, and he joins us now to discuss what the Queen means to him and what made him want to throw annual parties for Her Majesty. Stuart, where did your decision to throw street parties every year come from?
Good morning. Well, it started off when Her Majesty had her 90th birthday. And a number of us sort of got together and thought, you know, it would be a nice idea to have a street party. I remember as a child, I used to enjoy them, and I hadn't seen them for a long time. So we decided we'd put on a little celebration, we thought. We closed off the road, and we were astonished when thousands of people turned up. So we've sort of kept it going, and all the money we raised from this actually goes towards putting Christmas lights up around the town. So Guiseley Lights are the ones that organise this event every year now.
And it must be a great chance for the community to get together. But how many people are you expecting today?
Well, if it's anything like last year, I expect about 3,000 to 4,000 people will turn up. So we've got the road closed off. We've got stalls that are being set up as we speak. There's a stage being erected for some bands to entertain, and a fun fair as well. So there's lots to do here, and we're really looking forward to welcoming lots of members of the community to come along and support us and celebrate Her Majesty the Queen's astonishing 70 years on the throne.
And I suppose I want to ask, Stuart, and you might think, well, you know the answer to this, but what makes a good royal party from your perspective?
Do you know, I think it's just seeing every generation coming together. You know, friends that haven't seen each other for years getting together, everybody just having a really good time, I think. And at the same time, you know, remarking to each other about the astonishing work that Her Majesty the Queen has done over the last 70 years. Everybody I speak to says that she's just been a constant in their life. And I think they want to come together. They want to show that they're proud of what she's done. And they want to have a really good time. It's a great opportunity for the community to just come together and celebrate.
And of course, you're a minister in the housing department, and it would be remiss of us if we didn't ask you about that role and the fact that, of course, in a new bill that's coming up, the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, you're going to look at how you can bring about more house building in the country. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I think, you know, everybody recognises that we need more houses built in this country, because every one of us knows people that, you know, either want to get on the housing ladder or want to, and quite rightly, live in a decent home. But what we often find is that the planning system ends up being a sort of confrontational process, if you like, pitting communities against developers. And we want it to be a much better process whereby people, communities are the ones that are involved in deciding where those houses should be built. And that all of the houses we build should be beautiful in design, they should have the infrastructure that's needed to support them, and that, you know, there should be a sort of neighbourhood creation rather than just plonking estates in and around communities. And that way we feel that when communities are behind it, the evidence shows that we get much better development and we will get those houses that we need.
And Paul, you had a question about housing.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Andrews. I mean, just on the subject of housing, I mean, the truth is we have a chronic problem, don't we, with people, particularly younger families, who are simply not able to get onto the housing ladder because of various factors. I think one is the fact that we simply don't build decent council homes anymore, certainly nothing like we did in the number many, many years ago. I grew up in a secure council home. Millions of other people did, but it's almost now as if we've turned our back on the whole question of building council homes. But also, I think an issue that isn't discussed as much as it ought to be is the unrestrained lending by the banks, which appear to be completely unregulated when it comes to creating money for lending on mortgage, which has effectively just pushed up house prices more and more and more consistently. What are you going to do about those two aspects of the problem?
So we've got a number of announcements that we'll be making in the coming weeks. But you're right, we do need more affordable housing. That's why we've got this £12 billion affordable homes programme to create those homes that people need. I grew up in a council estate myself, and so like you, I know that security was really important to my family. And I want to make sure, and we as a government want to make sure, that is offered to other people too. So we are actively looking at that. Some councils are already building. We want to learn from them to see how they're doing that. And as I say, that work is ongoing at the moment. And equally, you're right about the mortgage market. This is something, again, that we need to look at. But there's a lot of work going across all the departments at the moment to look at this. And as I say, more will be announced in the future.
Yes, Stuart. So we know you have a busy day ahead of you, and we wish you all the best and hope it stays dry up there in Yorkshire. But thanks very much for joining us this morning to talk about your big plan and your, of course, big party that's happening up there today. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
So now we're going to go across now to the East Midlands, and our reporter Will Hollis is in Castle Donington in Leicestershire, and he's with the owner of a tea room who has been supplying local people with tea and indeed other goodies for their Jubilee celebrations. Hi there, Will. What's going on and where are you at the moment?
Good morning. So we're in Castle Donington, right close to East Midlands Airport. If you've never heard of Castle Donington, you will have certainly heard of East Midlands Airport, but there's lots of things that are happening here too. Maybe not just yet, because the party doesn't start until 12 o'clock. There's lots of very wet tables, despite the rain having stopped for a few moments now. You can see lots of people in high-vis jackets running around doing those last-minute bits of organisation. Lots of people after the party yesterday, maybe they had a little bit of a tipple, maybe they had a lot of food last night. Local people might not even be out of bed yet, despite the time in this morning. But lots of people who are working around are, of course, the people who are supplying the food and the drink here in Castle Donington for this special street party. One person who is here doing the last-minute touches is, of course, Kate. Kate, you work here at Tyler's, a little tea room. You're supplying most people with cakes, tea and coffee, keeping them topped up. What does this mean to you to be able to do something like this and sell your products and give away your products?
Well, it's obviously a very unique situation, isn't it? I have little tea rooms, I make all my cakes myself, and I think that's very much a British thing, tea and cake. And yeah, so it's a real honour to be able to do something like this for the Queen's Jubilee. So
we know that the Queen loves tea and cake. What would she like here? What's on the menu today?
Well, all of it. She'd like all of it, obviously. And we've got cupcakes. This is a rainbow cake Jubilee, so it's red, white and blue when you cut into the middle. And that's a Biscoff drip cake, and that's always a popular one.
And we know that Queen Lizzie, if not in person, has arrived here today. Where did you get this from? Because I imagine these are very difficult to get at the moment.
They are, and thankfully we're really close as traders. So the Lamb Inn down the bottom, one of the pubs, has lent it to me temporarily. So she's with us for a few hours and then she's going back down to the pub.
You've gone really hard on the decorations. If you can see around in the tea room, there's lots of red, white and blue. It seems that you've really gone quite hard. Why does this mean so much to you? And does it mean as much to the people here in Castle Donington?
Absolutely, 100%. I think how many queens or kings have been in power for 70 years, it's just so unique, and a lot of people won't see this in their lifetime. So I just think it's a huge event, and I'm so very honoured and happy, and no matter the weather, just really excited for the day ahead, really.
You do seem very positive, very optimistic. You've got to be like that in business at the moment, where you've got a cost of living crisis coming off of the back of COVID. How positive do you feel when you look out of those skies and it's a little bit cloudy? We've had rain all throughout the morning. Are those 1,000 people that are expected coming to Castle Donington today for this street party?
100%. We're British at the end of the day. You can't let the weather get you down in this country. So I think everybody's going to come, bring an umbrella, bring some Prosecco, and just we're going to have the best day. It won't matter. The weather never bothers us.
Well, we aren't going anywhere. We're British as well. I had to put on my rain mac just because it was getting a little bit wet. I couldn't just be out here in the middle of the North Worcestershire landscape in a blazer now, could I, Arlene, or could I? But we are still here for the next couple of hours. We are here when the party gets really pumping. Hopefully we'll see a little bit of a ray of sunshine, but I think people's spirits are going to be bright enough anyway.
Well, we have a saying in County Fermanagh, where I come from, we'll not sink with the rain. So, I mean, I don't think you'll need that, Mac, today. And can I say, I know Castle Donington. I've been to it on a number of occasions. It's a beautiful little town. So I hope they have a fabulous celebration today there. So plans from the government to launch a review on when and where imperial measurements can be used has caused quite a stir this week. Technology Minister Chris Philp said the plan was allowing a bit of our national heritage and culture back onto the shop shelf. But Labour MP Angela Eagle described the move as a pathetic attempt to weaponise nostalgia. Now, Paul, who's more accurate in their assessment in relation to imperial measurements?
Well, all I can say is I think it's wound all the right people up, Arlene. So you can probably guess where I stand on it. I mean, look, the truth is many people, I think particularly the older generation of our country, do still think in imperial measurements. They don't necessarily understand kilos and so on. And I'm probably, to a certain degree, one of those people. I'm probably part of a generation that often thinks in both. You know, I can think in terms of miles and yards, think in terms of meters, think in terms of stones and ounces and grams and kilograms, etc. But many people will have a particular preference, often according to how old they are. And it seems to me, actually, that it's a fairly sensible measure to say to traders, look, you can determine really how you want to sell this produce. And if people want to buy the produce, then they're going to have to learn the aspect of measurement that they don't currently understand. And to have a situation, as we've had in this country, obviously largely because of the EU directive, where traders were compelled to display particular metric measurements on pain of being convicted of a criminal offence if they didn't do so, I think frankly was a nonsensical situation to get into. And of course there were the cases of the metric martyrs, and one guy, I think Steve Thoburn in the northeast, who was actually convicted of selling his bananas in pounds or something like that. So that itself is a nonsense, and I think giving traders the opportunity to make that call in terms of how they want to display the measurements isn't an unreasonable proposal.
No, I don't think it's unreasonable either. And I'm probably in that generation, I'm a little bit older than you, that uses both. So it just depends what you're speaking about. So if I'm talking about the weight of my babies when they were born, it's definitely in pounds. I don't think I would ever talk about one of the babies being 3 kilos or whatever. I mean, it's always in pounds and ounces. But then when I go to shop and I look for a kilo of something, I mean, it's a case of choice, is it not? And being sensible and respecting the fact that people do want to use both. And I think that's fair enough, isn't it?
I agree, and I think the case, for example, about the weight of babies is absolutely correct. I was £9.12 when I was born, and I know that kind of weight is pretty big. What that translates to in terms of metric measurements, I have absolutely no idea. And of course, we drink pints and we do all sorts of things which are part of the old imperial measurements. And a bit like America, actually, we're quite mixed in how we do it. And you're absolutely right, giving people the choice to do it. And if they want to display If they want to continue displaying metric measurements, fine, they should be free to do so. If they want to do it in imperial, they should be free to do so. And then, frankly, it's up to us as the consumer to determine, whether we want to buy that produce, and if we don't understand it, to go out and learn it. I don't think that's unreasonable. But this kind of argument that you get from people, it's all about nostalgia. It's about harking back to the age of empire. The same kind of people who suggested Brexit was all about blue passports. I mean, I voted Brexit. I never met a single Brexiteer who ever said, I'm doing it because I want a blue passport. That was always a complete caricature of what people really believed. And I think the same people are probably now guilty of caricature in this debate.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. But I want to sneak in another little story before 11 o'clock, and that's around Tobias Ellwood, who has received criticism after he suggested that the UK should rejoin the EU single market to ease the cost of living crisis. The Conservative MP for Bournemouth East and chair of the Defence Select Committee argued that there was an appetite in the country to make course corrections to the current model, adding that this was not the Brexit most people had imagined. Now, Paul, is Tobias Ellwood correct insofar as this is not the sort of Brexit that people imagined? From my perspective, I think people would have liked us to get on and do more things about deregulation. That's fair enough. But surely going back into the single market's not the answer.
No, it's not the answer at all. And we have to remember, obviously, against the backdrop of Tobias Ellwood's comments, that he voted Remain. And like a lot of people who voted Remain, they've been trying ever since to find a way to lead us back into the European Union. And whether they want to do that, through piecemeal efforts like this or by just having enough of a referendum, we have to understand what their motives are. I mean, the cost of living crisis is caused by things that, to me, don't actually seem to be much related to Brexit at all. I mean, it's caused by, for example, supply chain issues as a result of the reopening of the economy after COVID and, the demand for gas and oil, etc. I don't particularly see how going back into the single market is going to make much of a difference to those particular pressures. And of course, going back into the single market, what would it mean? It would mean that we would be a rule taker and not a rule breaker. We would become a vassal state in that respect. We would have to contribute, again, huge contributions to the EU budget, probably millions of pounds a year. And it would also mean free movement. Let's not forget about that. And that was, frankly, one of the key issues, I think, why many people did vote for Brexit, because they didn't like free movement. They were concerned at the effect that it was having in terms of pressure on local services, jobs, wages, cohesion within local communities and so on. And I think any argument that says people just have to accept that arrangement again, having gone through the process of voting for Brexit for those reasons, I think all it would do, it would just simply serve to reopen that very inflammatory debate that took place in those years immediately after the vote and would increase the polarisation. I think it's the last thing that we need at the moment, and I think Tobias Ellwood's comments should be rejected.
Well, I'm always shocked at the fact that we're 6 years on from the referendum, Paul, and yet there are still politicians who think it's a wise thing to do to bring us back into that debate again. And you're right. I mean, it was so divisive at the time. A decision was made. We've moved on from that. But some people haven't moved on. And you see various politicians, either from Labour or indeed from the Conservative Party as well, saying, if we get rid of the Prime Minister, then that's the first step in reversing Brexit. So we're still talking about reversing Brexit, which I think is wholly disrespectful to the vote that took place 6 years ago.
Well, the truth is, Arlene, the people voted for Brexit and the establishment didn't want it. That's largely exactly what happened. And because of that, the establishment then set about, or large parts of the establishment, certainly, if you think of, most mainstream parties wanted to remain in the EU, big business wanted to remain in the EU, the banking industry wanted to remain in the EU. And all of these forces, after the result, conspired to do their best to stop it from happening or to have it watered down as much as possible. And the danger then, I think, where we saw it, is that it just stirred up an enormous amount of ill feeling from people who took a decision in good faith. They were asked whether or not they wanted to leave the EU. They voted in massive numbers to do so. And I think when the establishment came out and tried to undermine that vote, they actually undermined the very concept of democracy itself. And, at certain moments, I think democracy itself was under threat in this country. The last thing we need now is to go back to that debate, as you said, because I think it would reopen all of those old wounds, and it would be a very dangerous game to play, actually, because I think people would be on the streets. So those those members of the establishment making that call really need to be careful what they wish for.
Indeed, a very difficult time. And I have to say, I find the most inane phrase, it's not the Brexit that people voted for. What is that all about? Well, anyway, that's it for the first hour of the Political Correction. And if you want to get involved in the conversation today, please do get in touch with us. And now we'll have a little break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning. You're watching and listening to GB News. Coming up on the Political Correction, we'll be joined by a constitutional lawyer to discuss the role of the monarchy within our political system. We'll discuss RMT's decision to strike after the Jubilee weekend, and our regular Common Ground segment with Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Romain. That plus plenty more after the latest news with Tamsin.
Arlene, thank you. Good morning. It's 11 o'clock. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The Prince of Wales has paid tribute to the Queen at the Platinum Jubilee concert, thanking her for a lifetime of selfless service. Prince Charles also spoke of his late father, the Duke of Edinburgh, who he said was there in spirit. As 22,000 people gathered outside Buckingham Palace, the future king described events over the Jubilee weekend as an outpouring of warmth and affection.
Immense regret that she cannot be here in person with us this evening. But Windsor Castle is barely 20 miles away. So if we cheer loudly enough, she might just hear us. So let's all join together.
While millions are set to gather for street parties across the country today, with more than 85,000 big Jubilee lunches being held. The Duke and Duchess of Cornwall are attending a feast at the Oval Cricket Ground in South London, while the Earl and Countess of Wessex will meet people on the long walk leading up to Windsor Castle. Meanwhile, 10,000 people will stage a 2-mile-long carnival procession from Horse Guards Parade down the Mall to Buckingham Palace. And it's hoped Her Majesty the Queen will make an appearance on the palace balcony to round off the weekend celebrations. Meanwhile, Cardiff residents will have the chance to try out some cakes baked by the Duchess of Cambridge and her 3 children. Pictures posted on William and Kate's official Twitter account show Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis baking cupcakes. The treats, which are topped with frosting and decorated with hundreds and thousands, will be handed out at a community street party later today. In other news now, the Prime Minister will this week update the country on how the NHS is dealing with the COVID-19 backlog. Boris Johnson described work being done by the government as the NHS's biggest ever catch-up programme. Meanwhile, Health Secretary Sajid Javid says the government is putting more money into health and social care than any other has done before, but there is no quick fix. Tube services across the capital will be severely disrupted tomorrow because of a strike by thousands of workers in a dispute over jobs and pensions. Transport for London is advising people to avoid travelling as members of the Rail, Maritime and Transport Union will walk out for 24 hours. Many stations, especially those in central and south London, will be closed, while stations that can be opened may only operate for limited periods. The government is being accused of attempting to deport unaccompanied minors to Rwanda. The Home Office is attempting to remove 2 male migrants who claim they are 16. However, the government's carried out age assessments and believes they're 23 and 26. Refugee charity Care for Calais is issuing a legal challenge to halt their deportation. The first deportation flight is expected to depart on June the 14th. Russia claims to have destroyed tanks provided to Ukraine by European countries. The statement comes after Kiev was rocked by several explosions after a relatively calm couple of weeks in the capital. Smoke could be seen drifting over the city early this morning as emergency services responded to incidents in 2 separate districts. At least 1 person's been taken to hospital. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces have been on the counter-attack in the city of Severodonetsk over the last 24 hours. The UK's Ministry of Defence says they've been able to slow Putin's momentum in the east of the country. Intelligence chiefs say Russian troops are poorly trained and lack resources. Luhansk's governor says control of the city is now split 50-50. It's widely reported that one of the main suspects in the murder of former Russian spy and Kremlin critic Alexander Litvinenko has died of COVID-19. Dmitry Kovtun died at a hospital in Moscow. A UK inquiry ruled that he was one of 2 men who poisoned Mr Litvinenko at a London hotel in 2006, and that it's likely they acted on behalf of the Russian security service. Japan has criticised North Korea after it carried out what's believed to be its largest ever ballistic missile test. The country test-fired 8 short-range missiles from the capital, Pyongyang. Japan's defence minister says the tests cannot be tolerated. It comes just a day after South Korea and the United States ended joint military drills. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens, of course. Now, though, let's get back to Arlene and the political correction.
Good morning. You're watching and listening to GB News, and this is the political correction. We're here for another hour to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge. Coming up this hour, well, we've had 4 days of celebrations for the Queen's remarkable reign. But what is the role of the monarchy within our parliamentary democracy? I'm joined by constitutional lawyer Dr. Robert Craig to have a conversation about all of that. We also have our regular Common Ground segment with Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Romain, and broadcaster and writer Aidan McGee brings us up to date with all the latest sports updates. And as ever, if you want to get involved in the conversation, then email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at GBNews. This is the political correction. So the United Kingdom has spent the past 4 days honouring the 70-year reign of Her Majesty the Queen. People up and down the country and across the world have been lauding Queen Elizabeth's services to Britain and to the Commonwealth, her leadership through good times and bad. But what is often overlooked is the practical and immersive role of the monarchy within our political system. We all see events such as the state opening of Parliament and new Prime Ministers visiting Buckingham Palace to ask to form a government after a general election. But what are the powers, duties and obligations of the constitutional monarchy within our parliamentary democracy? Delighted to say I'm joined now in the studio, and he's going to tell us all about the Queen's place in our democracy, is lecturer in constitutional law at the University of Bristol, Dr. Robert Craig. Robert, thank you so much for joining me today, of all days, to talk about the constitutional monarchy. Just explain for our listeners and our viewers, what is a constitutional monarchy?
Oh, well, constitutional monarchy is, we have the paradigm example of a constitutional monarchy, which is a parliamentary democracy with a titular head, a head of the state who actually has no actual political or powers in the actual system. And that kind of balance is unusual, to say the least, and it's, to a certain extent, one of the most British things about this country, isn't it? The fact that we have this kind of unusual system.
Yeah. And I mean, we hear sometimes royal prerogative being spoken about. What is the royal prerogative?
The royal prerogative is a residue of the legal powers that are originally possessed by the monarch throughout history. And what's happened over the years, as we've got democratic, is that those powers have been effectively taken over by the elected government, as it should be in a democracy. But what's beautiful about it is that officially the Queen exercises all these powers, but in reality the Prime Minister exercises these powers. Yeah. And that dichotomy is almost designed to confuse the Americans, as far as I can tell. The form and the substance are completely separate. So Walter Bagehot, 150 years ago, identified two sides of the Constitution: the dignified and the efficient side. So the dignified part is represented by the Queen. Yeah. So she does all the formalities, but the efficient part is the democratically elected and accountable part. And that balance, that kind of duality, epitomises our system.
And I was reading somebody you will know very well, Vernon Bogdanor, in the Telegraph today.
I saw that.
And he said we've moved from the magical monarchy to a public service monarchy just during that period of time. Because actually, when Elizabeth was crowned 69 years ago, actually, just this weekend, some people actually did believe in divine rights at that time, didn't they?
Well, perhaps. I mean, I'm not going to parse the views of the population 70 years ago, but I think there's always been a public service element to the monarchy, hasn't there? I mean, Queen Victoria was renowned for the fact that there was a sort of sense of duty, and that duty was passed down to Queen Mary, the grandmother of the Queen, who she frequently cites as being the inspiration for her public service. So I think there's always been a strong tradition of duty and honour and public service in the monarchy.
But I think it has changed over those 70 years, let's be honest about it. But I think, for me, the magic, if I'm going to use that word, is the fact that she does it so seamlessly. So actually she adapts to everything that's happening in the nation, but she does it in a way that doesn't cause offence, and it's still very traditional.
Well, that's a skill, and we're very lucky to have had someone who's been not just very well advised, but has got good judgment. Yeah. And you know, we can't guarantee that we're going to have that indefinitely. I mean, we can look back in history and see monarchs and prince regents, perhaps, who have not perhaps lived up to that standard. But we can only hope that she's set such an example that we'll set that up for the future, for future monarchs. We can hope.
But I think this weekend again, for me, also showed the continuity of the monarchy as well, because people talk about, and we've seen some of the Republicans in the country talking about make Elizabeth the last and all of this sort of offensive talk. But actually what you're seeing on display is the handing over of the baton in a very seamless way, I think.
That's an interesting point. I haven't seen these ideas that make Elizabeth the last monarch. I don't think there's any appetite for that in the country whatsoever.
It's just the Republican organisation saying that.
It's interesting to watch Republican commentary at the moment, which has been quite muted, as far as I can tell, because for me, there is arguments and constitutional theory on this, but we have a republic already, really, in the sense that the functioning of the system is entirely done by democratic means. And I think we lose something if we get rid of the monarchy, if we were to get rid of the monarchy. We'd lose that dichotomy I was mentioning earlier, that sort of surface level and that sort of reality, which is so British. It's polite. We don't necessarily always say exactly what is meant. We know this from Britain, and it's exactly the same that feeds through all the way through our system and all the way through the Constitution, right to the top. So that the idea that the monarchy has some power is just wrong, and the idea that they are running the country is also wrong. But it looks like that from the outside, because the royal prerogative powers that we already mentioned are significant. They include making treaties, they include appointing a prime minister, proroguing parliament, dissolving parliament, summoning parliament. These powers are immensely important, but they're not held by the Queen anymore.
Yeah.
So that once you look at the reality, you can see that actually it becomes a symbolic question. We symbolically don't want to have a monarchy at the top, but that's actually to miss the whole point. That's my problem with the idea, is that it misses the reality and the structure of how the system actually works.
Yeah, and I was challenged by somebody from the Republic of Ireland at the weekend that everybody wants democracy. But as you rightly say, we have democracy in this country. What the Queen does and what the royal family does is actually give us that continuity, reflecting back on ourselves, a sense of Britishness. I mean, people from all political parties are out celebrating over the weekend.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter who you support politically, but she actually is able to bring everybody together.
And she stands above politics. That's one of the most important principles, but possibly one of the central principles of our political discourse, is that the Queen doesn't get dragged into any kind of actual political dispute. And that is really important and needs to be continued. But the other factor about the Constitution is its flexibility. And it's that flexibility with that stable kind of carapace over the top that allows for real change to happen. So that's why it actually ironically gives you more opportunity to have a flexible, adaptable system. We don't know what people in 100 years' time are going to want to do and where they want to run their country, but there's more chance, I would suggest, in a flexible constitution with a monarchy that has no real power over the top, for real change to occur and to be permitted to happen politically because of that stability over the top. What we don't want to do, in my view, is codify the system, make it... not even the Victorians codified the constitution. I mean, that's how arrogant it is to think that we know now how we should run the system indefinitely for all future generations. Whereas the Victorians, who built an empire, didn't think... They understood the value of the flexibility of the system. They knew that future generations would have their own opinions, their own choices, how they want to run the country democratically. And that is actually more achievable, in my view, if you continue to have an entirely honorific monarchy, a constitutional monarchy, which has no actual powers overlaid over the top, that allows for people to choose the people who represent them in the Parliament and get done what they want to get done, in my view.
Yeah. I think, Paul, you have a question that you wanted to ask as well?
Yeah, hi, Robert. If the powers through the royal prerogative are exercised by the Prime Minister of the day, I mean, I just wonder, is it the case then that effectively the monarch has no power at all and her role is nothing more than a kind of ceremonial one, really? And if that is the case, then constitutionally, what would we lose by having, for example, an elected head of state?
There you go. That's our mild Republican asking.
Yes, there's some mild Republicanism in there. Well, I think the first question is, what do we gain? Yeah. Chesterton's fence says that if you want to change something, you've got to explain what a good reason why we have it, and then justify removing that. Yeah. And we know there are very good reasons to have it, and there are no actual political powers. Now, when I say zero political powers, you can construct some fanciful scenarios where there may be... This happened in 2010, when Gus O'Donnell was worried that there might be a hung parliament. We didn't know who was going to be Prime Minister. And it was made crystal clear by the palace they weren't going to do anything until the Parliament had decided who to send to the palace. That's exactly how it should be. So in terms of what you lose something. As I mentioned before, you lose that dichotomy, that special nature of the British Constitution that is so British, is that you say, how was that? Quite good. Doesn't mean quite good. That means it's not very good. Yes, there's a duality. There's a politeness. There's a front, and then there's a reality. You lose that, and what do you gain?
Yeah, Paul, did you want to come back on that?
Well, I was just going to say, I think there's also another example in the 1970s where Gough Whitlam, the Labour Prime Minister, I think was removed from power by the Governor-General on behalf of the monarch. So there was a real-life example of an elected Prime Minister. And there were all sorts of controversies going on at the time in Australia, it's fair to say, within the Australian government. But that was an example of where that power was exercised. And I guess the argument would be, Robert, look, if you've got a president doing that, at least he or she has a democratic mandate mandate to do that, whereas when a monarch does it, it's kind of the monarch making the decision, or probably more realistically, the unaccountable advisors of the monarch making that kind of controversial decision. That's a bit harder to defend, do you not think?
I absolutely agree, which is why I'm one of the people who suggests that if there are any residual, and you have to construct some pretty fanciful scenarios for this to happen, those should be dealt with.
Yeah.
In other words, we should remove the possibility of the monarch being able to do any of these things. So a common example is actually dissolution of Parliament. So people say, oh, well, there could be a situation where there's an election and the Prime Minister thinks they can have another go straight away, but there's an alternative government that could be formed, the opposition could have the Lib Dems join, and they create these scenarios.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, and therefore the Queen in these weird circumstances should be able to say no. And I'm one of the few people who go, no, have the next election. They'll be punished in the ballot box.
Yeah.
Take the Queen out of all of these situations in all possible circumstances and make it clear that they were never going to get involved to avoid the Gough Whitlam situation. So I'm absolutely in favour of removing any residual elements. And there's only one left, really, that's actually, and even this one's not that big a problem, really, which is the weekly meeting. How much would the Tesco's chief executive pay for an hour to lobby the Prime Minister? Yeah, a lot. How many? Once a week? So that's the only one. But even that one's totally in private.
Yeah.
And it's never published. But that one's the only one where I'm like, I've got a slight issue with that one, right? But the theme of my argument is the Queen's residual points must be removed precisely to avoid the Gough Whitlam situation.
Yeah.
The beauty of that was that the Governor-General could leave, could be fired. We can't fire the Queen. We can't fire the King. So that needs to be removed. So remove these residual elements and make it completely dignified.
Although, Robert, I think our Prime Ministers do value that time with the monarch. So they say, anyway. Listen, I'm sorry we're going to have to leave it there. I could talk about this all day, as you can imagine. Thanks for coming into the studio today. So the Scottish town of Dunfermline is to become Scotland's 8th city for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. The town near Fife was picked over many others in Scotland, including Greenock and Dumfries. Our Scotland reporter, Davy Donaldson, has this report.
It was the capital of Scotland until the early 17th century and is steeped in history. Dunfermline Abbey towers above the city and 7 kings are buried inside. Fife Provost Jim Leishman says one is of great national significance.
We have Dunfermline Abbey, and in the Abbey is the grave of Robert the Bruce. His heart is somewhere else, but his bones are here, and many more. To be honest with you, Andrew Carnegie, you know, the world's richest man at one time. We've got Carnegie's birthplace, Carnegie Bash, Carnegie Library, Carnegie Museum.
Jim Leishman is a former player and manager of Dunfermline Athletic. They reached the semi-finals of the European Cup Winners' Cup in 1969, the club's greatest ever achievement. While Dunfermline has a rich historical past, it's also famous for music, with many local bands starting out here at the Alhambra before going on to bigger and better things.
There's some great musicians here, you know, the Naz Boys, Nazareth, Pete Agnew, Darryl Sweet, Dan McCafferty, were terrific. And then you had the famous Skids, the first punk band in Scotland, Richard Jobson, Stuart Adamson, Bruce Watson and Billy from Lochgelly, and then they split ways and Stuart formed the great Big Country, and some great music, you know, some great music and many more. Barbara Dixon, of course, representing the ladies, Dame Barbara Dixon, a fantastic lady. They're all fantastic people, as well as world-renowned artists.
Many of the bands have played in Pittencrieff Park, which was given to the town by Andrew Carnegie, a Dunfermline man who amassed a fortune and will be remembered for giving virtually all of it away to help others. David Donaldson, GB News.
Well, that was Davy Donaldson up in Scotland in their new city, Dunfermline. So Brits have been splashing the cash over the Jubilee bank holiday. Businesses have been quick to capitalise on the celebration with merchandise from bunting, chocolates and all sorts of novelty Elizabeth-themed paraphernalia. GB News reporter Alice Porter has visited a shop in Windsor, which has certainly got the taste for the Jubilee. Alice brings us this report.
Is this Windsor's answer to Willy Wonka? Claiming to be the world's smallest chocolate factory, Dr. Chocs has been getting into the Jubilee spirit with a limited edition chocolate bar.
It's been infused with orange and cinnamon oil, which is really nice. The cinnamon brings up the orange in the chocolate,
and makes it a really nice flavour, a very fruity flavour like the Queen likes.
Now I'm going to have to ask, how do you know what the Queen's favourite chocolate is? I mean, I know we've got Windsor Castle, I can see it from here. How on earth do you know what the Queen's favourite chocolate is?
Oh, we did a little bit of research and we had some contacts which were able to tell us what the Queen likes. So it's basically dark chocolate with some fruity flavours in it.
The factory has also been doing special Jubilee chocolate making workshops. I thought it was only right that I took part.
And the first thing we always start with is painting the bars of chocolate, okay?
Lovely.
This is made of cacao butter and food colouring, so it will set at room temperature. Now what we're going to do is fill up this mould with the chocolates coming out of the machines, and then you're going to add your toppings.
When not making chocolate, says Dr. Chocks, Ramnick works as a real-life doctor and says chocolate has many nutritional benefits.
It is an antioxidant, it's good for your heart, good for your brain.
Slam it down.
Oh. On doctor's orders, I thought it was time to try some of my chocolate. We've got milk chocolate, dark chocolate, and inside is, what was it, a caramel rum?
Yeah.
Sounds very nice. All right, let's give it a go. It's very nice. It's very good, if I do say so myself. With Windsor Castle now the Queen's permanent home, Ramnick is hoping she might pop by his shop once the Jubilee celebrations are over.
And we really want the Queen to have a happy, long life and hopefully come down one day and do the chocolate workshop with us.
Alice Porter, GB News.
It all looked very nice indeed. But coming up after the break, the transport union RMT have announced 24 hours of strike action tomorrow. But is such industrial action justified? And as ever, if you want to get involved in the conversation, then email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. This is The Political Correction. Don't go anywhere.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Jubilee and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Jubilee, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Welcome back to the show. Now, passengers across London are being urged to avoid travelling tomorrow after the Transport Workers Trade Union, RMT, announced a 4,000-strong tube strike in protest over jobs and pensions. The industrial action is expected to cripple the tube network, potentially leaving many unable to get to their work. London Mayor Sadiq Khan has urged the union to call off the strike, citing the damage done to London throughout the pandemic, saying the action could hinder the city's economic recovery. So is this action justified, or should the union call off the strike? Now, Paul, you and I have discussed this on a number of occasions, but now we're very close to the strike taking place tomorrow. What are your views on tomorrow's strike?
Well, I'm still very much of the view, Arlene, that the RMT and its members have got a legitimate grievance here. I mean, the truth is that workers on the London Underground are being expected to pay the price, in this case, of the serious lockdown restrictions over the last couple of years, which have had a profound impact on the tube in terms of its budget and so on. And you know, the Transport for London is looking to make significant savings. And as is often the case, it's the workforce that's being asked to make the sacrifice. And not unreasonably, the RMT are campaigning against the loss of jobs, up to 600 jobs potentially, the ripping up of working arrangements, a potential attack on pensions. And as I've said before, it's always very much a last resort for workers to take strike action. There are considerable hoops nowadays as a result of the law that unions have to go through before they can hold a ballot, before they can subsequently call strike action. There are minimum thresholds for things like turnouts, and in essential services, there's even more stricter thresholds. So I think for members of the RMT to have come to this view, bearing in mind they're going to be making a sacrifice themselves, they're going to be losing money themselves. They've done it because I think they have a legitimate grievance. And what I would say is, look, Sadiq Khan, as the Mayor of London, needs to come to the table, needs to speak to the RMT. It's not too late to have these strikes called off, but there needs to be real movement, and there needs to be real compromise, and there needs to be an understanding that ordinary workers should not continually be expected to pay for decisions and circumstances that are beyond their control.
Yeah, but it's difficult to see, Paul, what the Mayor more he can do, because 15,000 tube staff received an 8.4% pay rise in April. And that was a month after strikes cost TfL £13 million in lost fare. So whilst you're right to say, of course, the workers won't be paid for the strikes, it's also the lost fares, which of course is income to TfL to keep the whole network running. So it's going to force many Londoners to work from home tomorrow. And, you know, it has a real impact on the economy of the city. Surely, I mean, you've mentioned compromise and the need to have compromise. Surely there needs to be compromise on both sides.
I mean, the truth is, Arlene, and I say this as in my time I've been a senior trade union official, I've stood on many picket lines. Employers and governments will always make the argument, look, if you take industrial action, it will have an impact on the operations of the particular company, on the profits of the particular company, on the wider economy, and therefore you will always lose out in the long run. The organisation, the country will lose out in the long run. So, you know, you might as well call the industrial action off. I mean, that I think is a form of moral blackmail. It's a way of saying to people, look, whenever you take industrial action, it's never ever going to have any effect in our view. So it's a pointless right to hold in terms of the right to withdraw your labour. Now, the truth is, actually, history tells us that strike action can often work. Industrial action can often work by bringing to the fore the genuine grievances of the workforce and exerting a certain amount of leverage on employers and governments that otherwise wouldn't be willing to make concessions. And I've made the argument on the show before, Arlene, as you know, that the vast majority of advances ever won by working class people in this country have come about as a result of being prepared to struggle through their trade unions for better pay and better conditions and decent pensions and so on. So I think there will always be those elements who will condemn any form of strike action, and it's not something that people do lightly. As I say, it's a last resort. It's something that people only tend to do when they feel they've run up against a brick wall. And it's often the case, in my experience, actually, that in the hours and days before strike action takes place, that's the real point at which the horse trading can take place and both sides could seek to compromise. So what you need is both sides around the table, locked in a room, hammering out an agreement so it doesn't come to strike action. But if it does, I understand the motives of the RMT and I defend what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of workers in London tomorrow, I am certainly on their side because it's going to be mayhem tomorrow. I have to say I'm glad I'll be back safely in Northern Ireland because London will be in gridlock tomorrow, let's face it. But coming up, we're going to have our regular Common Ground feature with Berkshire-based rabbi Dr. Jonathan Remain. But first, here's your latest news headlines with Tamsin.
Arlene, thank you. Good morning. It's 11:32. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Millions are set to gather for street parties across the country today, with more than 85,000 big Jubilee lunches being held. The Duke and Duchess of Cornwall are attending a feast at the Oval Cricket Ground in South London, whilst the Earl and Countess of Wessex will meet people on the long walk leading up to Windsor Castle. Meanwhile, 10,000 people will stage a 2-mile-long carnival procession from Horse Guards Parade down the Mall to Buckingham Palace. Cardiff residents will have the chance to try out some cakes baked by the Duchess of Cambridge and her 3 children. Pictures posted on William and Kate's official Twitter account show Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis baking cupcakes. The treats will be handed out at a community street party later today. In other news, the Prime Minister will this week update the country on how the NHS is dealing with the COVID-19 backlog. Boris Johnson described work being done by the government as the biggest ever catch-up programme of the NHS. Meanwhile, Health Secretary Sajid Javid says the government is putting more money into health and social care than any other has done before, but that there is no quick fix. Russia claims to have destroyed tanks provided to Ukraine by European countries. The statement comes after Kiev was rocked by several explosions after a relatively calm couple of weeks in the capital. Smoke could be seen drifting over the city early this morning as emergency services responded to incidents in 2 separate districts. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Stay with us. The political correction will be back in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to the Political Correction. Well, as always, you've been sending us in your views, and I think, Paul, you have some views over there in Norfolk.
I do, Arlene, yeah. On Lucy Powell's interview with us at the top of the show about the Labour Party being the party of patriots, Nigel says, when Lucy uses the phrase, our patriotism is also about our future and not simply looking at our past, Nigel says it's our future, however, that it's our past, rather, I should say, that defines our future. This comment is telling about her and the Labour Party's real views.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a little bit of scepticism about Labour coming out as the party for patriotism. And I suppose really as well, Paul, using the Jubilee to make that point, which of course is not really a day for politics. Donald says, I do not believe that the Labour Party as a whole are patriotic. Emily Thornberry deriding and demeaning White Van Man, the tremendous effort they displayed to reverse the Brexit vote are just two examples. I pray voters are not deceived by this attempt to portray themselves as patriotic. So there's a bit of scepticism, I have to say, amongst our viewers this morning. We're going to move on now because Sunday, of course, is a special day for Christians, but we acknowledge that faith comes in all shapes and sizes. And each week on the Political Correction, we aim to talk to someone at the heart of his or her community to talk about what brings us together. In other words, our common ground. Well, yesterday I sat down with the director of Maidenhead Synagogue, Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Romaine, to get his take on some of the big stories of the week, starting, of course, with the Jubilee weekend. Here's what he had to say.
Like everybody else, I echo all the tributes. It's a very remarkable 70 years of service. But I feel, and this is where the mood music changes a little bit in what I'm about to say, I feel there's a really big difference between this and the 50th Jubilee. Because whereas that one was still had a sense of what was to come, this one is now looking back. It's almost like a sort of living eulogy, and this is anticipating a sort of end of an era. And that, given the fact that the Queen, unfortunately, is increasingly frail, I mean, missing two of the things she would never normally miss, the Epsom Derby, the Thanksgiving service and St. Paul's, it sort of rather begs the question of whether she should keep going or actually abdicate. And the problem is, of course, that abdication is often associated with failure or disgrace, a bit like, I mean, the last one, of course, was Edward VIII, who, resigned, abdicated, so as he could marry Wallis Simpson. But it doesn't need to be that way. And I'm actually think it might be the better course for her for two reasons. Firstly, because it's natural to retire, and maybe we should allow that and give her that permission. And second, it would give her successor, Prince Charles, a chance to have a decent innings and actually do the job he's been trained for so many decades himself. And I would say that rather than think of Edward VIII, we should in fact think of Benedict XVI, the previous Pope, who set a remarkable example, broke the mold, and rather than die in office, which all popes have done for centuries, he actually stepped back, he retired. And I'm sure you remember at the time, it was like shock, horror, how could this possibly be? But with hindsight, it's been shown to be a very wise decision. And maybe the House of Windsor should consider the same thing.
Although I think she has been very clear that she doesn't intend to abdicate, Jonathan, and indeed she always references back to her 21st birthday speech. You'll recall the speech of my whole life, whether it be long or short, is dedicated to the service of the country, or I think it was empire at that time. So I don't think she's of a mind to abdicate, but I understand why you're saying that.
Yes, I mean, she said that, of course, but she said that 70 years ago, and conditions change. And also, she could still be of service from behind the scenes and being supportive of Prince Charles should he take over. And I'm quite sure she would still have advice to give, as always in private, to the other members of the royal family. But I almost feel it's sort of, we're pushing her too hard to expect her to keep going when she clearly cannot do so. I mean, the only time I've ever felt deeply ashamed, recently at least, is when I met Pope John Paul II in the year before he died. And I was looking forward to it enormously. But by then he was so ill and he was more or less being propped up in his chair. And I felt so bad at having almost forced him out of his bed. It wasn't just me, it was with a group of others, to keep going. And I felt this is not right. And I just think we should pay tribute to the Queen, allow her to retire, maybe call it something other than abdication, if that's got sort of a dirty association to it. But I think it's time for her to step back and for us to allow her to step back gracefully.
And your second issue that you want to talk about today, Jonathan, there's not much grace in the issue that you want to talk about, but I know it's something that we've been talking about for quite a while now, and that's Partygate.
Yes, and I have to tell you, I was initially very torn, but I've reluctantly come to the decision that Boris Johnson should resign. And let me explain both why and also the reluctance. Firstly, I mean, it's very clear that he broke the rules, and he knew that. He knew he broke the rules. And then, of course, he compounded things by doing what is often the things that catch politicians out, which is not the original sin, but to cover up, which has now been very clearly exposed in the Sue Grave report. But the other thing is it's really poisoning government. I mean, I don't know about you, but you see ministers going on air, going on the radio to defend him, and they are getting themselves in gymnastic contortions. It's cringeworthy to see them do that. And it's just so debasing. And you think, these are decent people. They know they are trying to justify the unjustifiable. And it's just horrible to see and to listen to. Now, my reluctance is because actually I think he's done quite a few good things. I mean, the furlough scheme during COVID, the latest sort of help for cost of living, being very forthright in support for Ukraine. So it's almost a shame that he should go down for something fairly petty, if you like, which is having a few drinks and breaking rules. But, he did do that. And he did do it, as I'm sure you remember and I remember, when we weren't doing it. And I just feel that the bad example, the loss of trust, has now become so bad, so toxic, that really he ought to do the right thing before he is forced to do the right thing.
And of course, the parliamentary committee still has to report, and presumably that will have a huge impact. And that's the next piece that's coming, probably.
Yes, and also I think next month or later this month, 2 by-elections, one in a red wall seat, one in a safe Tory seat. And if the country does what the people at St Paul's Cathedral did yesterday and boo certainly with their votes, then he's going to be in trouble. And I think that the support that he still seems to have within the Conservative Party will melt away. But it's not a matter of being for or against Johnson or the Conservative Party. It's a matter of moral integrity. And we've been talking about the Queen and her moral integrity. And goodness gracious, if this isn't a time to stand up for it, then when is?
And one of the issues you mentioned there in the context of the Prime Minister was Ukraine. And of course, we should remember that that horrible invasion is still going on. People are still losing their lives in Ukraine. And we've passed now the 100-day mark. And I know you wanted to share some thoughts about Ukraine as well, Jonathan.
Yes, there's been the sort of talk in the air about whether one should take it a stage further on this side of the war, that is, and assassinate President Putin. And I must admit, when I just say those words, part of me recoils in horror, because it's not a nice thing to say or do. But again, it's a little bit to do with our associations. I mean, we think assassination, think of John F. Kennedy, think of Martin Luther King, which we would all condemn. But of course, what's important about those assassinations is that they were peacetime. Whereas when you're in a war, it's different. And it seems to me that it makes no sense when you're in a life and death battle to sort of try and kill the frontline troops and not try and kill the commander. Especially if the frontline troops are often very innocent, if you like. They weren't the ones that initiated the war. It's actually the commander behind the scenes who did so. And in fact, there's a 1907 Hague Convention which bans assassination, but in peacetime. Whereas it is seen as a legitimate effect of war. And it seems to me that it would be morally justified if it was actually to end Ukraine war. Now, of course, there are a couple of reservations here. One is that it might lead to revenge killings, and an immediate backlash might be something awful like, I don't know, Russia dropping chemical weapons on Ukraine. So that has to be put into the balance. And the other question mark is what will be the consequence? Or the unintended consequences. I mean, will it mean that somebody from his inner circle, even worse, even more hardline, will take over and will pursue the war with even greater cruelty and rigor? Or will it lead to a change of direction, a bit like Khrushchev taking over after Stalin? So, you know, those in the know will have to make a sort of informed judgment about what's more likely to happen, a better Russia or a worse Russia. But certainly it's a topic that I've been thinking of, and I'm sure many people at the very highest leadership are thinking of too. But morally, it seems to me there is no reason in wartime why that should not happen if the government thinks that will lead to a better outcome.
And I have to say, I was thinking about Putin recently because I noticed that the Ukrainian courts had captured some soldiers and they gave them a sentence of life imprisonment in Ukraine. And when I looked at the pictures of those young soldiers, they looked so terribly young, probably didn't really know what they were doing. And then they're put in jail for the rest of their lives because they were obeying the orders of their commander, as you have pointed out. So yes, it's a very controversial issue, but it isn't the first time, of course, that leaders have been assassinated. And yeah, I'm sure we'll get a reaction to that, Jonathan, indeed. So thank you so much for joining us on Common Ground. It's been a little while, so it's great to see you back again and to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
So that was Dr. Jonathan Romaine. But let's now return to the Jubilee celebrations taking right across the nation. Our Southwest reporter Jeff Moody is seeing how people in Dartmouth are enjoying the Jubilee weekend, where he's joined by street party organiser Ali McGregor.
Thank you for that, Arnie. Well, just before things kick off, I'm just helping out a little bit and sorting some burgers out for all the volunteers because they've been working very hard already this morning. Up at the first crack of dawn. There you go, madam, a double burger for you.
Thank you very much.
That's $5.99, please. Only joking. There's not a lot to see behind me at the moment, to be honest, but we are expecting the Morris men to arrive soon. We're expecting the bouncy castles to arrive soon, and more importantly, if the weather holds, we're expecting the people to arrive. Hundreds of people, possibly even more. It's quite a big patch here. Let's hope the weather stays nice, Alan.
Of course it is. The sun's going to come out and it's going to be brilliant for today.
So what have people got planned for today?
Traditional family picnic. So come down, bring your picnic and enjoy the entertainment. We've actually, one thing I remember, we've got walking rugby. So if those want to have a go, come and join in.
Walking rugby?
Yeah.
So you play rugby but you walk? I think I could just about manage it if it was walking. That doesn't sound too bad. Dartmouth is very proud, justifiably,
Yes.
of its royal connections, isn't it?
Oh yes, because this is where the Queen met Prince Philip up at the Naval College just up the hill, and he was a young cadet of 18 and she was only 13. But bless her, it's all going on.
So that was where the fairy tale romance began, just up the road.
Yes, absolutely. It all started here in Dartmouth, aren't we lucky?
You are indeed, and this has been a wonderful celebration, hasn't it, over the last few days? After the last 2 years we've had, how important do you think this Jubilee has been?
Oh, mega important. It's been wonderful to see the town come together, come back to life after 2 years being dormant. People are coming out, enjoying themselves. It's been wonderful. Just what we needed.
Absolutely, it has. And all along the front there, all along the harbour, people have been enjoying drinks outside the bars, the music's going, there's a great party atmosphere. And I promise you, there'll be much more to see later on, so stay tuned. We're going to be down here all day, but for now, back to you.
And promise me, Jeff, you'll stay off the bouncy castle, please.
I promise.
OK, so now the people of Northern Ireland have also been coming out in their droves to mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. I was at a number of events on Thursday, bakery competitions, fancy dress competitions, obviously parades and services of Thanksgiving. And then today, of course, they'll all be taking part in those big Jubilee lunches. And to see more of what's been happening in Northern Ireland, I'm joined by our very own Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, from Killilea, where he's speaking with one of the people organising the local celebrations, Ken Tate.
Well, hello, Arlene, and welcome to Killilea. No bouncy castle here, just a very real one, very famous for it. And some of the people that were educated in it, of course, Hans Sloane, the inventor of milk chocolate, and came from this very town. But with me now is Ken Tate. He's one of the organisers of today's big barbecue. Ken, tell us what's going on.
Well, we've been at this for about 5 or 6 months now, building up to what you can see in front of you. We're the Killilea Community Association, as well as a few other friends, and we've had backing and sponsorship from the Newry Mourne Down District Council and from the Heritage 4 Lottery Fund to bring things together as they are now. We, as you can see, have set out a number of tables and chairs and barbecues about the place, and we're expecting people to start to join us from any time now, 12 o'clock or thereabouts, and we'll be running on until about 5 o'clock.
This has been a pretty cross-community Jubilee. Do you find you're getting a lot of support from both sides of it?
Everybody has chucked their hands in, everybody, and it doesn't matter who they are or where they're from. Even people from outside the town have contributed in some way and continue to do so. It's just absolutely wonderful. The place just gels, everybody works together.
And over COVID, of course, places like this have suffered in pandemics, lockdowns and so forth. How do you find it's all coming back to life now? Is it coming back?
It is starting to come back. People are getting their confidence again. There's still a few people who are a wee bit hesitant, and rightly so. You need to just remember that it's not gone away completely, it's still there. But we're at a point now, I think, where everybody knows to look out for themselves and look after themselves and take responsibility. And that's pretty much what seems to be happening.
So this event today will be up from about 12, well, in the next 10 minutes. We have been setting up most of the day, most of the morning. And when do you see it going over?
We officially wind up at about 5 o'clock, but we'll see what length this piece of string is, and we'll go with that.
Well, there you are from Killilea. Hopefully the weather holds for us. It is slightly overcast at the moment, but no rain so far. And the crowd should come here because it is a lovely place to be, and there'll be the best barbecues you could possibly get.
Bias at all, I can tell, Dougie, around all of that. But tell me, the weather does look a little bit overcast there. What's the prediction for later on? Is it going to stay dry?
Well, there's a 30% chance of rain, but we are hoping that does stay away. It is a little bit blustery, but it's not cold, and the town looks amazing. And the local company here, Finnebrogue, has donated quite a few sausages to this. So come on down and get something to eat. Enjoy the day here, and hopefully there'll be a cake cutting contest later on as well.
I'll be hot-footing it back to Northern Ireland to hopefully partake in some barbecues and cake eating as well later on, Dougie. But thanks so much for joining us, and Ken as well, for the organisation that's going on. Because, it always takes somebody to step forward to organise these events. So it's really good to see that happening right across the UK. Thanks very much, Dougie. So you've been watching and listening to The Political Correction. I just want to thank everybody for their warm congratulations for my damehood, which came in the birthday honours list. It's a huge joy and thrill for me. And I just want to thank all of the GB viewers and listeners who've been sending me in their good wishes. Thank you so much for that, genuinely. But join us next Sunday at 10 a.m. for 2 hours of discussion, debate and analysis of the week's biggest political stories. Up next from Cotsall, South Staffordshire, it's Alistair Stewart.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK will be cloudy with outbreaks of thundery rain in central and southern areas, drier and brighter elsewhere. Here's the details. Southwest England will be rather cloudy, especially towards the northeast, with some showers at times. There'll also be some bright or sunny spells, these mainly in the west. It will remain mostly cloudy in the southeast, with showery rain becoming lighter and patchier. Some bright or sunny spells may also develop in the south. South Wales will also be mostly cloudy with hill fog in places. There will also be outbreaks of showery rain, which will tend to ease. It'll be a cool feeling day across the Midlands, and it will remain cloudy or overcast throughout. Outbreaks of heavy, at times thundery rain will ease and turn patchier from the south. The northeast of England will remain generally dry, although cloud will steadily increase from the south, with sunny spells in the north. A fresh easterly breeze will also limit temperatures along the coast. It'll be another fine day across southern Scotland. There'll be plenty of sunshine on offer here and remain dry for all, feeling pleasantly warm in the sunshine. Northern Ireland will also have a dry day. It'll be sunny here for most, with just a little bit of fair weather cloud at times, also feeling pleasant in the sunshine. So rain edging north and easing a little, drier to the north and south with sunny spells here. And that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable, and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.